if there's a saber-tooth tiger in front of you, you'd be panting. There's no way you would be doing nice, really soft breath. So when you're able to crack into that long exhale, you actually activate the vagus nerve and you activate the parasympathetic nervous system. You're telling your body, ooh, I could chill out.
Welcome back to another episode of the Peak Performance Life podcast. Today, I am honored to have someone who I met at a very special occasion of health and longevity dinner that I was at in Los Angeles a few weeks ago. His name is Dr. Kien Vuu, or Dr. V. He exemplifies resilience. He survived as an infant refugee on a challenging journey to America. He's overcome diabetes and high blood pressure. He's now a champion of optimal health, happiness, and human potential, making him a sought-after speaker and consultant by Fortune 500 companies, professional sports teams, and association meetings from all industries. With tenure at UCLA, National Institutes of Health, and Howard Hughes Medical Institute, Dr. V is a triple board certified in interventional and diagnostic radiology, as well as anti-aging, regenerative medicine. He's a founder of Vuu MD, Performance and Longevity. He advises athletes, executives, celebrities, and organizations towards longevity and peak performance. And he is the #1 best-selling author of a book called Thrive State. Dr. V, thank you so much for joining us here today. All right. Well, let's get into it, man. I mean, let's talk a little bit. Let's start with a little bit about your journey and the things that you kind of overcame that helped you develop your unique mindset that you have today.
Well, that's a great thing, and let's do it movie style. Let's take you to different parts of the life, and then take things back to where things make sense, and let's take people on a journey today. So, 7 years ago, I was an interventional radiologist, attending doctor, kind of a younger hotshot, so to speak, that are speaking around the world of interventional radiology. Was chief of interventional radiology at my hospital, and what I thought would give me a great and happy life, bought my fancy car, bought a fancy home, my dream home, thinking I had everything. But, at that point, underneath my white coat, I was sick. I was overweight. I was diabetic. I had high blood pressure. I was on several prescription medications, tired, fatigued, brain fog, you name it. I was a doctor and I was sick, treating sick people, pretending that I knew the answers. And right around that point, I knew that I had didn't have the tools to actually keep me well. And so what I did was I, started on my own health journey, and I started with diet, sleep, exercise, the basics. And that actually reversed things, in a pretty quick period of time. I was able to reverse my diabetes just on that alone. But then I went deeper. I did a fellowship in anti-aging and regenerative medicine. And then I studied with spiritual shamans, studied epigenetics, nutrition. And then I got some really huge healing that I think had skyrocketed how I felt. When I did the diet, sleep, and exercise, I started to notice changes in my body, changes in my blood count. I had more energy. Mm. When I started to do the deeper work, because I would still find myself stressed out at times, like, you're out hustling, you're doing all these things, and find myself stressed out a lot too. When I did the deeper work, it took me back to my childhood. And I was a boat refugee coming from Vietnam, spent 8 months on a refugee boat, 3 months in a Philippine refugee camp, and then I came to America. And you would think, oh, this kid would be so grateful to have, survived that. I was the only infant to survive that boat journey.
Wow.
But I remember when I first started school, I was constantly being teased for the holes in my hand-me-down clothes, the stinky food my mom sent me to school with. Go back to your home country, Chinky. And so there was this narrative. There was this narrative of not being enough, not being American enough, not being rich enough, not being tall enough, not being white enough, all the things. And that narrative, that programming, I should use, is what I lived my entire life through. Because I felt like it was not enough, I was constantly seeking for success, something outside of me to prove that I was worthy. So my entire life, all I was doing was chasing this thing that I thought would complete me inside. And the more chasing I did, and once I achieved all those things that they told me, hey, this would give you a happy life, I find myself unhappy, depressed, had all the things outside that was supposed to give me those things, but not in a good relationship. Um, Lost close people in my life, and then I almost, had to stop and give up surgery altogether because I had a tear in my shoulder. And that was a big, big wake up call to how I was living my life. And I think for many people, it's these big wake up calls, these rock bottoms potentially, that really is the gift for you to realize who you really are. And so when I started to do more of the deeper work of uncovering what was going on, I started to say, wow, how I was living my life was just a mask. It was a mask. And right now, in science and neurobiology, we're beginning to understand a part of our brain called the default mode network. And it's a primitive part of our nervous system. Anybody that's in this meat suit has this thing. Animals have this thing where they could recognize fear and danger and remember it. So we have that as a part of us. And so we download all these things from our parents, from our teachers, from society, and they make up a little bit of this subconscious programming. And it's also going to learn the things that has hurt us in the past. Divorce in the family, drugs in the family, um, you know, death around, all these traumas. And then even smaller traumas that people don't even realize, like not being seen, not being heard, not being able to be yourself. And so what happens is that in order to feel that love and connection, which every single child wants, we sometimes don't feel like we get them. And we put on this mask of becoming something we are not to get that thing. For me, didn't feel American enough, rich enough, white enough, all those things. Well, for me, I had to put on this mask of I need to be, have high energy. I need to have this personality that can cover up this not enoughness. I need to attain success. So here's the thing. Everybody has their own version of that. Everybody has their own versions of trauma leading to this mask that they wear that cover up who they are. And if they go through their entire life doing that, your body is in resistance of who you naturally are.
Wow.
So I became the poster child of the Dalai Lama quote when he was asked what he found most interesting about humanity, he said, man, because he would sacrifice his money it would sacrifice his health in order to make money and then sacrifice his money to recuperate his health. So this is what happens when we're not conscious about how we're living our life. If we are living in that state of this mask that we're on, that we are not enough, that we are not loved, that we're not connected, we live through that. That goes against who we are, and that raises the stress hormone in our body. But if we could start to remember who we are, if we start to remember the things that light us up, we remember the things that we are already connected, safe, and loved. And in that energetic, you shift the messages you give to your cells. That's why there's lots of awesome things I find in the longevity and biohacking space right now with all this technology. But if we actually look at where people live the longest in the blue zones, they didn't have access to any of them. It's how they chose to live their life. And in the blue zones, they didn't have a society that said you needed to be X, Y, and Z to be worthy. No, you are connected to a bigger tribe and community, and everybody plays a role and part. So I start off with that. And if you've got any questions you want to, dive deeper into within that context, feel free.
Well, I absolutely love that. And I think this is, some of the things that not enough people are talking about. So I'm really glad that you're talking about it. I know when I went through my health challenge 10 years ago, what I thought was the worst thing that could ever happen to me. I mean, all I knew how to do was make money on a computer. And I couldn't type more than a sentence or two without being in massive pain, had to use a voice dictation software, the whole story. So, but in the moment, right, I thought this is the worst thing. How could this happen? What am I going to do? Right now, looking back, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. Right. And so I think, and hopefully there's people listening right now that may think, they may be in a down spot. Maybe something happened, in their lives, whatever it is. And in the moment, it may feel like this is the worst thing that could happen to you. But actually, in the future, the things that end up are the worst things that ever happened to you could actually end up being the best thing that ever happened to you in certain cases. So I think it's important to remember that. And I really like, kind of where you were going on along those lines as well.
Yeah, I want to add to that because I almost don't say that it is the best thing that's ever happened to you. Or maybe it's the best thing. The fact that you have those moments, the fact that we have struggle, the fact that we have challenges, the fact that we have those things, it's a part of our old selves, the old program that reaches this little thing. And if we could surpass that, we basically evolve into this new version of us. And without that thing that we thought was the worst thing that's ever happened to us, without that thing, we would not have become who we really are or remember who we really are. Exactly. And so I am grateful for those things. And here's one thing that I teach my clients, when they're like, Jesus, now I'm starting to wake up. Oh my God, I wasted so much time doing X, Y, and Z at the end. They're always hard on themselves. And I'm like, one cool thing to be able to do is the following. See, we could always look from the future and look back and say, dude, that was the best thing. We could do that right now as well, because what we can do is we can imagine because of, longevity and all that, we're going to live 50, 100, 150 years longer. Imagine that version of us. Imagine who that version is, the person that is wiser, the person that's stronger, the person who has just overcome all this stuff. And if you take that consciousness and you bring that back to you today, what would that person say to you in terms of who you are right now? How would they spend this time right now? How would he look at that thing that just happened right now? And if you could imagine that, you could be like, oh my, you know what? That just happened because there's a better stuff that's coming in. I might not know what it is just yet, but you could almost imagine. Last year, I had somebody in my business steal almost $500,000 from me.
Wow.
And I was surprised how quickly I got over that because it hurt a lot. But it was almost sort of like, okay, I know I'm going to be able to talk about this in a podcast one day or go on stage and talk about how in my business, trying to grow my business, there was this thing that happened. And it certainly happened for me for this also, because I talk about the energetics of who we are and how we view and approach life. I talk about forgiveness. And the universe just gave me an opportunity to truly test what I'm teaching other people. Can you forgive? Can you take whatever's happening out here outside and know that you are safe, you are loved, you are connected? Can you still have that energy, not depend on outside things that determine who you are, but you determine who you are? And if you remember those things, and that's what's happening, you will always have direct control of how your cells behave.
Amazing. I really, really love that, man. This is so good. So I love this. And it's funny because just recently, the last couple of days, I've been listening a lot about, I've been listening to like Dr. Joe Dispenza and some other people and about like, living your future self now and stepping into the new you and leaving behind the old you. And it's something I've been thinking a lot about. So would love to hear your kind of thoughts and perspectives about, so people are like, okay, this sounds awesome. People are right now. I know if I was listening, I'd be inspired. I'm like, okay, like, what do I do now or whatever, right? Like, or
Yeah, well, it kind of depends where you are in your journey. So I help my clients basically through that part. But, one tool I like to use with my clients is a bucket list. And you're like, why would a bucket list help me with health, longevity, and performance? Well, if we consider this, I look at my child right now, 2.5. She is bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. She's curious. She's finding things and she's playing. And I feel bad sometimes because I realize sometimes when I say, hey, enough playing time, we got to do this, right? We naturally are curious beings that play, that get inspired. But I think throughout life, depending on your parents, your upbringing, and all those things, you might have shut down who you are and the things that actually bring joy, creativity, inspiration. You might forget those things. And that's what lowers our vibrational frequency. It lowers our state. And then not being who you are, like I said, creates disease. Not being your authentic you, your body goes, okay, this is my frequency naturally, but you are not being that. You're blocking that. How are my cells supposed to receive signals of safety?
Yeah.
So how does a bucket list help? Well, the bucket list is really designed to just write down all the things that you might want to do, achieve, people you want to help, that actually inspire you, that brings out these emotions. It's not really about attaining the goal, the thing is, once you start doing and applying these things, you'll discover this thing like, oh my God, I thought, making $50,000 in a week is going to make me feel great. And I achieved that thing. Yeah, I didn't do it. Oh, I just had a trip with Pops that we never did before back in his home country. Wow, that was beautiful. It really brought us together. It allowed me to feel this way. So a bucket list is the things that basically you put down and you put onto paper, these conscious ways that actually inspire you. And you do a self-experimentation with all these different things and ask, how do you feel? How does that change your energy levels? And then you're going to find things you're like, oh my God, as I'm doing this, I'm getting really pumped, really excited. I don't feel like I'm working at this thing at all. And I'm recruiting other people in there. The energy here is so high. That's who you are. Who you are, your joys, your creativities, what inspires you, that is unique to you, just like your fingerprint is. And how that's helpful is if you could rediscover that, if you could follow that, if you could follow that inspiration, you remember who you are. When you remember who you are, you're in the vibration of who you are, and basically you resonate as that. And you're giving your cells that you are thriving, that you are just being you instead of not being that. And so when people feel stuck, again, it's a sign. It's a sign that you're starting to wake up. Because the people who are out there just, partying and clubbing and all these things, nothing wrong with those things. But if all they're doing is escaping, they're not realizing that potentially they're not living as them. And being stuck is the first step of going, something's not right.
Right.
What's up here? So if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling depressed, all those things, certainly you may want to check with a doctor for that. Make sure there's nothing biological going on, but also maybe you're just not being you and you're suppressing the you, which is why you feel depressed.
Yeah.
And so those are some of the things that I work through with people. But I think having that bucket list and starting to do it and holding accountable to things, and it's not about achieving the goals. It's about remembering who you are, what lights you up in the process of doing all these things.
100% agree. 100% agree. Yeah. And I've kind of been there as well, chasing the money goals, hitting certain goals and realizing, okay, wow, this doesn't change, anything really, essentially, other than obviously having a little less worry about money. But, in terms of everything you're saying is just really spot on. And I can tell that you've kind of realized over the years, maybe through your practice, right? It's like, how many people do we see that we know that they're sickness, whatever it is, autoimmune disease, sickness, this, that, whatever, is caused by some sort of, emotional imbalance or something going on in their life, or something that is not just like, it's not always just what they're eating, right? And many, many times it can be, and you should definitely look at that. But a lot of times it could be much deeper with that. There's a lot of people speculate over other diseases, right? That many diseases stem from certain emotional, issues. And that's something you've
Let me
seen.
give the new version. If I were to teach the medical school curriculum again, if I was dean of a medical school, I would teach this curriculum. And I'm going to teach this curriculum to your guests. In just a few minutes, you could become your own doctor. Because here's the thing. Everything is energetically connected. We feel each other through energy. Light from the sun comes in. The photons reaches the retina, changes. Basically, it reaches the receptor. That causes a configurable change in the receptors that produces an electrical potential. The electrical energy reaches parts of the brain cells, releases serotonin. Serotonin is now this mass energy that now goes to its serotonin receptors. All of a sudden, we feel good. Everything is energetically connected. So if we know that, physical, mental, emotional, social, spiritual, all those categories of things are all energy. So they're all connected. So if you sleep not very good, so physical is sleep, nutrition, movement. So if you're not doing any of those three things very well, you're not going to think well, you're not going to feel well. You're probably going to be in your own head, so you don't feel like you got a purpose. And I bet you're not very pleasant to hang around either. So these things are all energetically connected. So there's no one thing without the next. So, the cause is also the response. It's all connected. And so in order for you to be your own doctor, can you audit your areas in those? And I'll say it again, physical is sleep, nutrition, movement. Social. Are you in positive, nurturing relationships? Do you know how to hold your boundaries against negative energy? Your mental, your thoughts and mindset. Where are you putting your focus? We can't control all the negative thoughts that come into our mind because they're there to protect us. But we can control what we choose to focus, where we choose to put the flashlight, you know?
Mm.
And then purpose is really, can you remember who you are? Can you remember who you are and do your thing? The purpose of a heart cell is to pump blood. It does its thing. The purpose of a lung cell is to extract oxygen. Why is it doing it? It does its own thing, and then it's doing it for the entire organism that is us. We are merely cells in the organism that is humanity. And if we just do us, if we remember the things that light us up, if we remember who we are, and we just share who we are with other people, that's purpose. So spiritual and purpose is also always just remembering that we're connected to something much, much bigger. That you and me are this thing together, like working cells together towards this organism that's humanity. And if we think of ourselves as that, why the hell are we worrying about our own problems anymore?
Yeah. You mentioned something interesting about are you able to block negative things, right? So let's talk. Tell me a little bit about that. How are people there's so many negative things people bombarding people with negative, whatever it is, via the news or this or that, or, what are some of what's the defense system there? What can we do?
Yeah. Well, let me just use the personal example of my relationship with my beautiful fiance. I used to think that why the hell I am in this relationship from hell, right? And now I know that is the perfect relationship that allowed me to grow into who I am, right? And I use as an example basically of our level of consciousness and how we deal with information and energies coming at us. Mm-hmm. So back in the day when she gets upset and she gets triggered, she would come at me very hard, very angry, and tell me all these things. And I would like fight back or shut down because those things would affect me, because she's telling me I'm not much of a man or all these negative things that my self-worth got pulled down. Mm-hmm. And that would make me want to run away. Me running away turns on an abandonment wound in her. And then all of a sudden, she does that thing some more because when she feels hurt, she needs to come out and be aggressive. So everybody has these triggers and reactions to that. Now, in the unconscious state, that thing will continue to trigger on over and over and over and over again. But if we start to become a little bit more conscious and start to wake up, if we start to remember that right now, our natural responses are coming from this reptilian part of us that got programmed when we were kids and basically are reacting to traumas we have in our past. If we don't look at that stuff, we will consistently be triggered.
Interesting.
And as I move through the process and say she reacts in her way, if I can go, man, if I could see her for that innocent child who in her past certain things have reminded her of danger, of not being safe, and she had to come out in that way to protect herself, I can start to have more compassion for what's going on there. And as I start to heal my own triggers of not being worthy, I could then go, you know what? This isn't on me. I know I'm a worthy person. This is something she's going through. So I could start to become a little bit more compassionate. Yeah. I could become a little bit more present because me not being present, me running away triggers her more. So this is what's happening with like all this negative stuff that's out there, people interacting with each other in negative ways because of just triggered responses reacting to each other.
Yeah.
But if we could start waking up through the process, we can show up differently for people. And so you asked me the question of how should you deal with negative energy? Should you run away? Should you leave? It depends where you are in your evolution of consciousness. If you have become the Buddha and reached a state of enlightenment, somebody could be throwing stuff off and you could just be, laugh and smile. Oh, child, how are you? That's all good. Mm-hmm. If you're not quite there yet, you could just be like, you know what? This is really bringing up some uncomfortable feelings. I need to leave right now. But when you said X, Y, and Z, I felt like this happened to me. So if you're not quite there yet, just acknowledging how you feel, having the boundary and going is appropriate. But once you start to continue to work on those things within yourself, you'll find that a lot of the negative energy that's coming your way, you can start to shield it off. And so
Yeah.
that's the practice of building that muscle. I'm not there yet. I'm certainly no Buddha, and I don't think that's kind of where I want to go. But
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah. No.
practice of evolving into higher conscious beings and the best versions of us.
Absolutely. I mean, it's, this is the number one biggest thing that I've been personally working on from a spiritual growth, personal development perspective, let's call it, is being less reactive, right? So many, it's so easy to get triggered, right? Whether you have, kids who are acting out or doing something, or, family members or whatever it is. And people are so reactive, and they're so, again, not having the compassion for the other person, like you said, right? It's like one of the most important things that I think, if people could remember, that everyone is doing the best they have with the tools that they were given, with the upbringing that they had. If you were in their same situation and had their same life experiences, you can't think that you would be doing any better than they are. So having that compassion, and it's an ongoing process, man. And I think it's probably going to be something I'm going to be working on for the rest of my life. Is
Yeah, look at the sign right behind you, my friend.
Yeah, exactly.
Always
Always
be
be learning.
learning.
That's right. Absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit about your book, Thrive State. I know I'm sure some of the things we've just spoke about are covered in there as well. But what are some of the key takeaways, like maybe a little teaser here for people about the book?
So I have the second edition out now. The first edition was really about letting you know that you can control the energetics within your body. And that ultimately controls whether you get disease or whether you live a long time and have peak performance. And it was really the blueprint for that. And that book did really well. After the pandemic, I saw a couple of things. I saw that the people who were in Thrive State wasn't barely affected by the virus. They were much, much more resilient people. Then I'm also thinking, why, when some people have the blueprint for something, that they actually still don't transform? What's
Mm,
stopping them? And then I started to really study the default mode network and started to study this primitive aspect of our mammalian or reptilian, all animals have this, is this programming that remembers basically the things that hurt us. Now we're worse than the mammals, or mammals and reptiles. The mammals and reptiles, you got real danger, like a predator there, boom, they're off. But when they're done, they start grazing it. For us, because of this massive brain we have, this little thing of, like, I could tell my daughter, like, if I just leave the room for a second, all of a sudden, boom, she thinks that there's an abandon, that she's being abandoned. Even at that young age, you might start learning, oh my God, why did they just leave me? What do I need to be more of? Oh
mm,
shoot, the last time I cried, they said be good, behave, do this, act this way. Oh, maybe that's what I need to do to be loved. Maybe that's what I need to do to be safe and accepted. And so we learn these things. This all lives in the subconscious, in the default mode network. And this is why, the work of Bruce Lipton and Joe Dispenza, I like too. And for me, I bring the scientific model of why that works.
yeah.
And so when you're in that mode of this old programming, you're making choices, but you're not making conscious choices. It's all from that place of reacting. So when you react, it's an unconscious choice. You just stimulus response.
Right.
But when you can start to see that programming, you can start to make new choices. And so in the second edition, we dive in deeper into, the default mode network and a framework I give people as to how to make better choices to have lasting change in their life.
Amazing. I love that, man. That is really, really good. Yeah, because I kind of feel like what you said, like during the pandemic, I felt, again, I'm pretty resilient to it. Obviously, in the beginning, you had a little bit of a scare, but then I kind of felt, like I dealt with it pretty well. And I feel very, very fortunate that my family and I dealt with it pretty well. But again, you did see many people that didn't. So what else, what can people, how can people start to become, well, I guess the million dollar question, right, is like, everyone, like, not everyone, I shouldn't say, but if assuming you know what to do, right? Assuming I got to eat better, sleep better, exercise, whatever, right? why do so many people not actually do it, right? It's kind of, you kind of touched on it a little bit there, but it's kind of the $1 million question I've been thinking so much about, right? Like how is 50% of our country, overweight, right? Like when we know what to do, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's the best thing. I mean, and we could talk about how marketing, big companies, shift the way we behave, and then they become habit. And
Mm,
so one of Joe Dispenza's book is breaking the habit of being yourself,
yeah.
right? Because when you're in the program, what the program is a habitual way of thinking, feeling, behaving the same way that basically gives you the results that you have.
Yeah.
And why you don't have those results is when you start to do something new, there's going to be a part of that programming that goes, I shouldn't do it. You'll start to make up excuses in your mind of why that's not the case. Why? Because that program is trying to keep you in that space, in that program,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because if you were to do that thing, you would already be that person,
Yeah.
right? You would already be that person. But this program will always try to sabotage you. And I can give several examples of this. I mean, there's been moments where I remember I was going to be on national radio one day, and the night before, I don't know, for whatever reason, I just stayed up, late at night, and I was drinking, and I was like, not good for that radio show, because there was a part of me that probably said, hey, you know what, you don't deserve it, you're going to mess up anyway, whatever it is, and you do that. And there's been several instances where I sabotage myself, and we do that in our careers, we do that in our relationships. And so, you do that enough times, I hope you better wake up. And it takes,
Yeah.
longer for some than others. I mean, for me, it took me a long, long time to wake up.
Do you have any practices like, certain, visualizations or kind of thinking time or anything that people could do to, I know myself personally, I spend a lot of time in the mornings. I spend a lot of time thinking about the ideal version of myself, what my ultimate goals are, visualizing things of that nature, to try to really paint that picture. And I think that a lot of people just kind of wake up and start, all of a sudden they check their phone, they're doing this, they're sucked into the world and the everyday life. But is there anything that you kind of do to step away from the normal reality and kind of maybe think differently?
Yeah, great question. And I teach this in my Thrive State Activator course. We're about to launch, and I think by the time this is up, it would be launch already. If you go to thrivestatelaunch.com, but I go through a series of exercises that you can do to change your state. And if you can
Mm,
change your state, you basically change your biology.
yeah.
And so all those things are energetically connected. And if you know that, you can work on one thing and basically change the state of all these other things. So if you're not thinking and feeling very well, you could shift one thing in another area. If you start feeling good, all of a sudden you start thinking good. You're at a different frequency, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so the physical part is awesome, because the physical thing you could actually do to shift the way you feel. So physical, that's movement and posture,
Yep.
right? When you look at somebody who's sad and depressed, they're in that energetic state. You could tell their body's a certain way. They're
Yep.
speaking very slow. They're probably breathing up in their chest. You can
Mm,
look at somebody and go, man, that person, energetically, it does not feel very good.
yep.
But if you could just hack the system, even if you don't feel like doing it, start to, put your chest up, get in a power pose,
Mm-hmm.
breathe deeply. Or I do something called laughter yoga. I teach people how to like move around, dance, laugh, smile. And even if you don't feel like doing it, once you start doing it, your body goes, oh, okay, I guess we're laughing. I guess this is fun. And it'll start to release endorphins in your body. Your cortisol levels will start going down. Pains will start to go away by doing
Yep.
that.
Yep.
So there are ways of hacking the system, and the breath is an awesome thing, because the breath also, there's a very specific breath pattern to almost every energetic pattern we have, right? Anxious, worry, anxiety, fear allows you to breathe by your mouth, mostly up in the chest. But when you're deeply relaxed, when there's a saber-tooth tiger, or if there's a saber-tooth tiger in front of you, you'd be panting. There's no way you would be doing nice, really soft breath.
Yeah.
So when you're able to crack into that long exhale, you actually activate the vagus nerve and you activate the parasympathetic nervous system. You're telling your body, ooh, I could chill out. And then there's also some transformational psychedelic breathwork practices that quiets down the default mode altogether and puts you in states of like, euphoria, you release old traumas, you tap into clarity. I teach people how to get into that too. But, breath work, movement, and just remembering to do the things that bring you joy in those states are great ways to hack yourself. And I think a morning routine such as yours, visualization, because what you're using, mental, right? Mental, you pull it in your mind. If you could put it in your mind, you focus on that thing, you focus on what you feel, you feel what you focus on. And when you start to focus on those things, you start to visualize things. Oh, you start to feel different. Energetically, you're different, right?
Yeah.
So those are great practices to do every morning. And I use them all in my Thrive State Activator. I basically teach you in different areas how to hack into that energetic of who you want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And gratitude is another big one that I really focus on. I'm really grateful for what I have. I'm visualizing me, my wife, and my daughters all living to over 100 years old, right? This is like my ultimate goal, things of that
nature. Are you a girl dad only also?
Yep, 2 daughters, 13 and 11.
Oh, yeah. Hey, join the club.
Nice. Yeah, man. It's a beautiful thing. Well, amazing. Dr. V, so you got this ThriveState launch.com. Is that it?
Yeah, ThriveStateLaunch.com. If you want to check it out, we're going to do a huge launch special that gets you into the community earlier. But if you just want a taste of what we do with some breathwork practices and a lot of free resources, I've just created a new free resource bundle at ThriveStateBreath.com.
Nice. ThriveStateBreath.com. I like that. I'm definitely interested. So the breathing is it like holotropic breathing? Is that what it's called? Or
yeah, the holotropic breathing. Some people call it, contained circular breathing. Some people call it psychedelic breath work. A lot of different type of breathing patterns there are out there. But if you do something prolonged where you're breathing very heavily in and out and you're hyperventilating, what happens to your body is you blow off CO2. When you blow off CO2, the pH in your blood goes up. And the combination of those two things constricts blood vessels. Some of the blood vessels being constricted are the ones going to your brain. But a certain part of your brain, guess what? The default mode network gets quieted down. And when you can quiet that down, then all of a sudden you could tap into not your old traumas and your old programming. You tap into what's possible and what's really true. And, psychedelics is what allows some people to get there as well. So psychedelic medicine is a, big exciting field in longevity for those reasons.
Yeah. But to clarify, the breath work you're talking about, the psychedelic breath work, as it might be called, there's no psychedelics involved in there. That's breath work that elicits similar responses to what
Correct.
people have.
Yes.
Yeah. So that could be a good one for people who maybe aren't ready to take the full leap yet. They can start with the breathing techniques first, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, amazing, Dr. V. Where else can people find you? I mean, they should buy the book.
I'm on Instagram at Dr. VMD. You spell it out, DOCTRVMD. And then if you just want to get a taste and get started, if you just found me for the first time, engage with me there or go to ThriveStateBreath.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much, and hope to do it again soon. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, can you please leave us a rating or review and subscribe? I've realized that while we have actually increased our downloads a lot, we're actually getting a lot of downloads, which I'm really happy about. We actually have very few ratings. And I realized that I've never asked people really to rate much. So I'm asking you now if you could please rate and review and subscribe. And if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to anyone that you think will get value out of this. Also, if you haven't checked out our line of products at buypeakperformance.com, you get 20% off your first order. That's www.buypeakperformance.com. We have some incredible products, including our organic high-altitude coffee. If you don't know this, coffee is one of the most heavily sprayed with pesticides out of any crop. So it's really important that you drink organic coffee. We've gone above and beyond to source what we believe is the highest quality and healthiest organic coffee in the world. We're also famous for our organic green superfood powder. You can get 20% off of that as well at buypeakperformance.com. We also have an organic vegan and paleo plant protein. See, most of the vegan proteins out there are using brown rice protein, which is really not a good source of protein, and it's also a grain. And if you're paleo, you know that grains tend to cause inflammation in some cases for some people. And so we wanted to make one that was paleo friendly and vegan and organic. We made an amazing amino acid profile, so it's really one of the best plant proteins for muscle building. So you can check out Peak Performance Organic Plant Protein. You can find that on our website. Of course, all our products are on Amazon as well. So thanks again. And again, please, if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to someone who you feel can get value out of it. And please leave us a rating, review, and subscribe.